This is the Ben Herman Show.
He is none other than the Brian B himself. He is one of the most premier destination private event DJs that travels around the world DJing some of the most luxurious events worldwide. When he isn't on a plane or behind the deck somewhere, he can be found giving back to the industry by speaking at various industry events, writing for various industry blogs and publications, leading his own crowdsourced coaching program, growing a 301 level DJ conference, or recording episodes of his very own DJ podcast, the Travel DJ Blend. Make sure to check that out. After living in the Big Apple for 11 years, he moved recently to Raleigh, North Carolina with his wife, Tara, their 3-year-old daughter, Annie, and an 8-year-old teacup Morky, Tucker. Brian B, welcome to the show, man. It's such an honor.
Man. Hey, likewise. I've looked up to you for a long time. I've been super impressed with what I've seen. So to get an opportunity to talk with you for a little bit, I'm excited as well.
Oh man, I love it, man. I think that the respect is mutual for sure. So tell me a little bit about what are you the most excited about currently that you're working on? Man,
there's so many irons in the pots, if you will, just like different things kind of happening. Currently, we are really just, well, at least for me personally, I'm excited. I am kind of engaging or at the forefront of trying to engage in a new conversation in regards to DJ pricing.
Love it.
Just feel like it's time. Like we've kind of changed the game in a couple different ways, and I feel like it's time for a new reset. And so right now, I'm just kind of using my platform as much as I can to have those dialogues to see where we can do to move the needle. And it was really birthed out of Instagram account that is out there kind of stating what budgets are. And the idea behind this account is to let couples know, let vendors know what things really charge or what people are really charging and what they could be spending. So they look at it as, an overall event budget, what it is per person. And though they don't name vendors, they list the categories. And boy, seeing that kind of pricing and what was out there, it was just eye-opening for me. Even for what I've been charging over the last little bit, it was still eye-opening. And this has been a journey I've been on for a long time, kind of moving from packages to more talent-based pricing.
I was going to say, yeah.
To this. So this is all new.
So you're already responsible for kind of being the leader in moving from packages to talent-based pricing in the past, correct?
I don't know if I'd say leader per se. I definitely am one of the people that have been pushing it for sure. And I don't know if I was the first. I mean, it's hard to say. I don't know. But I'm definitely a voice out there that's been a proponent of this for a long time.
Yeah, it's not like there's a secret directory of this is the first DJ company that's ever done this, right?
1,000%.
For sure. Well, tell me about this new pricing strategy. I'm so curious.
For me, I've never been a fan of it. I think we default to it because we think it's easy for clients to understand, maybe, but it's kind of like a coercion into let's get them into the one that has the most value. So we put, one on either side and then have the middle package is kind of there. But I think it does a disservice to DJs. And the reason for that is it comes across as anybody can have access to that package. And it feels very commodity driven when we market as if we're very customized. You're going to get an experience that not everybody's going to get. What we do is so different. How we influence your event's going to be unique to you. But then what we're selling is everything but. It's like anybody with the money could grab that particular package and it's just the same. So that's kind of where I left that model. And especially if we're talking about what we would consider single op, somebody who doesn't have any employees, the calling card is that I'm unique and I can customize the event. It's not like you can just buy this off the shelf. And so for a while, I've been really advocating for, let's talk about how we can value the thing that is most important to a DJ, which is not your gear, because that anybody has access to that. What really differentiates to me the difference between a DJ to DJ is what's between their ears, their mind, what they bring from a creative standpoint. It's not even music. Everybody has access to the same music these days for the most part, right?
Yeah.
So
it's like the experience, right, that we create for the crowd and for our clients.
Yeah. So for the longest time, I've been like, hey, let's talk about splitting our pricing not as one package rate, but what we value and placing the most value on is really what I would consider either the creative or talent fee, the person providing the service, then putting, your production, which would be all your gear, in another bucket. And then if you're a traveling DJ, maybe there's the travel fees, and then separately, if it's there, the enhancements. It all leads to a price. But by doing it this way, you're saying what I value, and hopefully the way that you position it in the sense of a talent-based fee, the most of the money is in that bucket. So if we're looking at just round numbers, let's just say it's a $5,000 fee or whatever, $4,000 of it should be the talent fee or something close to that, where they go, okay, now I know that this is what this person values. This is what the most valuable piece of this whole thing is this person. And that's why I'm valuing it at this. Because we tell that story. We have the ability to control the narrative. And so
absolutely.
For the longest
and there's only
time,
one Brian B, right? So that way there's no you're decommoditizing yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So to your original question here, to move forward, I saw this Instagram account and really looked at it and was like, man, this is eye-opening that these budgets, now they deal with the luxury set, so it's kind of skewed, but I don't think it's skewed and I say skewed meaning like the budgets seem like out of this world, like oh my gosh, people are paying, anywhere from $1,500 a head to, $5,000 a head. That's like not normal. But I think what stays consistent is the thought that the actual entertainment portion or whatever category, the percentages all stayed the same throughout all the different levels of budget. And crazy enough, the entertainment section was coming in around 10 to 13% of the overall event budget, right? Man, it got me thinking, I'm like, first of all, am I even hitting 10% of someone's entertainment or of someone's overall event budget? I don't know, because I'm not asking that question. The question I've been programmed to ask, if I even ask it, is what is your entertainment budget? Not your overall event budget.
And a lot of our leads and prospects, they usually don't even know, right? Like, I don't really know what my entertainment budget is.
Right. So I feel like the better question to be asking is, what is your overall event budget? Because that tells us so much more about the event. One, if they already have a venue, right? And the venue is, let's just bring it down to reality, to maybe like a $50,000 budget, which I think is like what middle America would be, right?
Let's agree.
The venues, let's just say they go to a high-end venue and it's going to be 30,000 of that budget, and they only have 50, they're going to be venue poor, as I like to say, because all of it's put into that. So what they have left to surround the rest of the team with isn't a whole lot. So me asking even their event budget doesn't tell me a whole lot, that they are, even if they allocated $20,000 for it, but I know that they're having at a venue that's 30,000, the rest of the team's not going to be probably at the same caliber that I would hope that we would all want to be at, to deliver on the reputation of the venue and what the experience that they're expecting, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
That was an eye opener. Number one, seeing that it was at 10%. And there were some cases where I'm like, okay, need to change the question. Also need to know where I stand in that mix. Like, where am I? And I can tell you there were some that I was definitely not 10%. And I was way below. I'm talking like maybe 1% of the budget. Where
because I was going to say, I mean, with $100,000 budget, 5,000 is only 5%, right? So and so that led to the third point of this, which was me thinking, okay, out of all the vendor categories, which one has 100% of impact throughout the entire event? I can think of really two categories. The one would be the entertainment, and I'll make my argument here in a second. And the second would be the planner, if they have a planner. Because typically, at least the ones I work, the planner is involved with so many decisions throughout the entire day, and they're there the entire day. There are some planning companies where they only work, 5 hours of it or whatever, but the ones I tend to work with are there all day. So their impact can be felt all day, because it's like having, I wouldn't say a concierge service there at all times, but it's kind of feels like that in some respects. You have an advocate for you in that regard. But if you look at the other categories, and this is no shade thrown at any of the other categories, but even let's just take photography as an example. How much of an impact do they have at the event that can be felt at the event?
I think the answer is
You
zero.
capture the event, right? And the
They can
memories,
capture
they
it.
capture that.
But
But they don't really add to the vibe, right?
It's after, right? Unless they're doing
Absolutely.
a same day edit. Okay, then we have an exception there. But even that is going to be felt at the very end of the event, right? Whereas
You're right.
entertainment, if you're doing ceremony all the way through the end of the reception, the music that you set, the vibe that you set early on, I would even argue that the way your gear looks and everything like that before you even start can have an impact.
Absolutely.
People walk in, they see the space, and they go, "Oh, this is going to be different," right? So,
the energy that you create during grand entrances, right? For sure.
Yeah. And I would say there's been some certain events where the best moment was the last song of the night. So the impact is felt all the way through to literally the last moment before we leave, right? So if we're impacting 100% of the event, is asking for 10% of the budget out of the realm of things? I don't think so. So my thought here is twofold. One, no matter what you charge, I don't even think it matters, but you shouldn't be worried about getting to at least 10% of the event budget or feel ashamed for asking, because if we're impacting 100% of that, that's a very small percentage of the overall budget that you'd be affecting, but you have the most impact on. So to feel comfortable in saying, should I be raising my prices or whatever the case may be, take a percentage out of the equation altogether, just a flat fee. I don't think that's that crazy to be asking for it when you realize that the impact you have on an event. And I had never had any way to frame it that way because I hadn't thought of it in terms of percentage. And then all of a sudden this kind of dropped in my lap and I'm like, wow, this really does tell a little bit different of a story about what we can bring to the table. So that was kind of my first thought on it, was like, hey, we can't be afraid to tell the story of what we're impacting, and whatever we're charging probably isn't going to get to 10% of the overall event budget in most cases anyways. And if we are there or a little bit more, still good, because then we're right in line with the narrative that, hey, we have that kind of impact on an event and we should be okay in that regard. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that really stands out too is, in the times of social media, right? The era of social media, everyone wants to have everything Instagram picture perfect or reel perfect, right? So even if you think about the background of, these reels or these photos that are captured live in the moment, because remember, we talked about photographers really influenced that kind of the past after the event, right? But people actually pulling out their phones, that's actually contributing towards the experience that they're, a part of during the event, right? And DJs are still responsible for that as well. Like when it comes to the uplighting and the decor, the monograms and that kind of stuff, the video projection, right? I mean, all that kind of stuff still contributes to even that experience. But it's not even just the in-person experience, which is incredible to think about. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think the other coin to this is knowing the overall event budget allows you to rise to the level of the event. So in other words, I'm not saying that we don't all get $500,000 budget weddings, but let's just say we did, right? What I would want to bring to the experience, maybe it's gear related. I don't know until we get into the project to know what's needed, but that should look different than what you would bring to a $30,000 budget wedding or a $50,000 budget wedding, right?
Yeah.
It's 10 times. So having that intel at the very least gives you an idea of like, okay, hey, I want to rise to the level of the event at hand and make that experience from at least the entertainment portion of which is going to impact 100% of the overall event experience. I need to know this so that way I can rise to the level with what I'm bringing. And sometimes, to be quite honest, it's not even about adding elements like musicians or, different pieces of gear or whatever.
Vendors. Yeah.
It could be literally just you saying, hey, if I know the event's going to be $500,000, I'm just throwing that as an example, 10% $50,000, right? So if I know that and my general, charge is $5,000, I can take way less events on that month to be thinking and be implementing just the creativity part, not even thinking about the gear and the other things that are a part of it, to go, I don't need 10 of events. I can focus on you 100% and give you that white glove service that you deserve for spending $500,000 on your event. I want to rise to that level to give you what you need. You know what I mean?
Makes sense. Yeah. It actually, Brian, as you mentioned it makes a ton of sense because it's all relative now, right? So the larger the budget, usually maybe, the more affluent the client, right? That's one. So they may have higher standards when it comes to more premium service or luxury service. Second is usually a larger budget comes with more guests in attendance, food budget and so forth. So then on the DJ end, you're entertaining more people, right? So therefore, versus 50 people versus 500 people, that there is a difference in experience that we can provide. And there are more lives that we're impacting in that moment. So it actually makes a ton of sense.
I also think too that there is a thought that you kind of need to set parameters around that, right? Like I've been blessed to do a few of these ultra luxe weddings, not many, these aren't every weekend by any stretch, but where, the budget's $1 million plus, right? Well, 10% is $100,000 if we're talking about $1 million. I couldn't spend $100,000 even if I wanted to correctly. Because what they're really hiring us for, and I don't think a lot of people talk about this a lot, they're hiring us because we know how to spend their money in that category better than they do, beyond just a skill set, right? So
absolutely.
I have kind of found my sweet spot to be between 10,000 and 50,000, which is still pretty broad. But my point is that if we go over, and in this discussion with clients, the way I'm kind of painting the picture is, if we go over $500,000, it's 10% or a maximum of $50,000. So in other words, we go beyond 500,000, we go to $1 million, you're still only paying 50,000. Why?
Okay, gotcha.
Because that's my sweet spot. I know how to spend $50,000 really well for an entertainment experience that I think I can deliver on. Could I bring in Flow Rider and a couple of these other artists and be an agency and kind of bring in those? Absolutely. But that's not what I specialize in. I'd have to go through all this.
But the agencies do that, right?
Yeah. I don't want any part of that. But from an entertainment perspective, let's just talk about if it was just DJing only, I feel like I could take one event, your event, for that $500,000, $1 million budget, and not have to take on 2 or 3, what I would do during the month, and have to do that and just give you the experience of maybe making custom edits, maybe just rethinking, what that feel is. I have a client coming up where their whole thing is they grew up with hip hop, and they're kind of the way I kind of sell myself. I don't really even sell myself as a DJ, really. I kind of call myself a musical storyteller. So I could tell a couple's story through music. And so for me, that means every one of them is a one-off, because your story is not going to be the same as somebody else. And this particular couple, they grew up with hip hop being a musical influence for them that was massive. Like they go to a lot of hip hop shows. Any DJ is going to take that intel and say, okay, let's incorporate hip hop music into the dance set. That's a given in that scenario. Yeah. But I was like, okay, how else can I tell this story, in a way that they only had me, they didn't have any other musicians or anything else. So I was like, okay, maybe we find some different ways of telling that hip hop story during the cocktail and dinner hour. And that might be, let's program this to be kind of like a brass field during cocktail hour of people playing hip hop music where you're like, wait, is that Dr. Dre? I can't really tell if that is or not. You know what I mean? And then during dinner, maybe we do covers of some of these hip hop tracks or a jazz feel that's a little bit different, where we're including this in there. It's not going to be the entire night. And the story is told between the three of us, the client and myself, we know what this is. Absolutely. But if I'm being frank, do I have a lot of brass and jazz music of hip hop covers in my library? No, because I don't get that kind of stuff. So I've been spending an ungodly amount of time researching and looking for those elements that I can play in. And these aren't just finding, the Boyce Avenue covers that everybody knows or, the Vitamin String Quartet stuff. It's that's low lying fruit. That's easy. But really kind of digging for these gems requires me to have something where people go, oh, okay, this is what I'm paying for, in the sense of me telling their story. It's just a little bit different. So, and like you mentioned, I imagine even the couple just giving you a head nod during dinner, right? I was like, right. Oh, man, yes. Right. You understand this. You really paid attention. Yeah. And I told them specifically, I said, obviously during dancing, we're going to talk through that music in our last meeting and kind of go through what artists you really want. But for this dinner and cocktail time, let me be the storyteller. That's what you're paying me to do. And these are going to be Easter eggs. I'm not going to tell you what I'm playing. I want you to be surprised when you kind of hear it. And hopefully I've gotten enough of their vibe and asked the right questions where I'm going to nail that. It's never 100%, you're right? You don't know until you get there and go, oh, this is not hitting. I got to flip directions or whatever the case may be. But the goal is like, that's kind of the rub, that you don't know until you get into it. So
but
like,
you get a vibe, right? During the planning process, for sure.
Totally. Yeah. So if you're asking the right questions and doing your homework, I think it can really land. So those are just examples of me kind of bringing in, that different element and what they would be paying for on a creative fee, as opposed to just like, and I couldn't go to that depth if I'm booking myself out 100 times a year. Right. But if I'm able to say, hey, this event's $500,000, I'm charging 50, I can take less and spend the time on you to be able to deliver that white touch, high touch moment, white glove service.
Love it. Love it. So I've got kind of a side question, and then I'll come back to kind of, this pricing strategy. My side question is, speaking of hip hop, your entertainment company is called B-Boy, right?
Yeah.
Were you a B-Boy at some point?
I get that all the time.
In the early days?
I get that all the time. The reason why that came out to be is my last name, which I don't even put out there hardly anymore, is Italian. It's hard to pronounce. It's hard to spell. So it's Bonacici. And people just in school used to call me B-Boy, just because it was like, we don't even want to play with this.
Gotcha.
Going back, I thought it was a good name to use for my entertainment company because it kind of tied into DJing and stuff. But the amount of people that have asked me if I still B-Boy or do I offer that service is crazy. So I'm like, dang it, I shouldn't have used that as a name, but it is what it is. So no, I appreciate the art form. In fact, I know people who do it who are incredible, and I've always loved it. Have I ever done it myself or DJ'd for B-Boys? No, unfortunately, it was just kind of part of a nickname I grew up with for the longest time. Yeah.
The only reason why I had to ask is because I actually started off as a B-Boy. So I was a huge hip hop head back in middle school and high school. And, there's 4 elements of hip hop. So B-Boy being one of them, of course, rap is another one. Graffiti is another one, and then DJing. And so really I went from B-Boying to DJing, and that's how I actually got my start in the DJ world. So it was just curious if we had a similar start. That's all.
No, unfortunately. But yeah, it's kind of cool because I love meeting people who have that kind of background, and we can kind of connect because I still have a love for it. Even though I've never done it myself, I still appreciate watching them. Anytime I'm on YouTube, that usually comes up in my my feed of things to look at.
It's one of my guilty pleasures. I still watch breakdance videos and competitions just for fun to unwind. It's just one of those things I like to do. But we'll have to get you. I'll have to teach you some moves next time.
Let's do it, please.
So coming back to the pricing strategy, one thing I'm curious about is, have you tried this on existing couples where maybe you had prospects or actually ended up booking someone with this new pricing strategy intact? And if so, how do you approach that conversation?
Yeah, great question. I have had this conversation. I think for me, and this isn't going to be everybody's situation, but I deal with planners 90% of the time. So it's very much a warm introduction from the planner to a potential client. Rarely am I ever booking B2C. It's always B2B.
Gotcha.
B2B. Which is rare in the DJ space. Most people go B2C immediately. I think at a certain price point, you kind of phase yourself out of those B2C, because even if you do get those, they're going to have a planner already or going to get one, and they're going to run that person by that planner, and that planner wants to feel comfortable referring that person. So the first part of the strategy of this situation is I needed to go to these planners and talk this through with them. This is what I'm doing now. This is what I think. And it's been great because there's been some great dialogue. And I think for the planners that weren't really charging appropriately, it's been eye-opening for them as well to see hey, maybe I need to move to percentage. And a lot already are. I would say planners and typically venue and food are all on percentage models already. So
it's already becoming kind of the standard then.
It is. Yeah. Right. Planners are generally at about 20% of an overall event budget. And then when it hits a certain level, they increase that. So if it goes over, I don't know, $1 million, let's just say, then that percentage is going to go up considerably. Yeah. Because the scope has changed and what's needed to do it.
Responsibility has changed for sure.
Right. So totally. So that's been a really great dialogue, to be completely honest with you. And I think the other thing that for me has been kind of a win, if you will, has been having the parameters of this is what the minimum and maximum you're going to spend. So mine is either 10% or $10,000 on the creative fee is whatever's greater in that is going to be that. And then a maximum of $50,000. So they have the parameters, so they know they're never going to go beyond that. So as a planner, you're kind of keeping track of the budget in a lot of cases. So having those line items that know, hey, this is never going to exceed this, and it's never going to go below this. Like it's going to be this. So even if the budget is, let's say it's $80,000, right? So my minimum is $10,000 on the creative side, the talent fee side. And that's not a flex. It's just kind of where I want to be. And so I say that to say that doesn't mean I have to do a $100,000 wedding. It could be a $75,000 wedding, but you're going to pay $10,000 because that's what I specialize in. That 10 to 50 range is what I'm good at. I can't do a $500 wedding. I would give you $10,000.
I hope nobody is good at doing a $500 wedding.
Totally.
Yeah.
So, immediately I had one planner tell me, I've got a wedding for you. It's $250,000. And so 10% would be $25,000. That was the first time I had ever booked that. Normally, I would be at $10,000. So immediately, I went up $15,000, right? So it allowed me to go, okay, this changes the game. And again, it really, to me, I'm thinking from it in terms of like resetting the value of a DJ in general, right? If I can get DJs to kind of move to this, the category as a whole moves up. Right? Regardless of what budgets they're working with. It could be in Podunk Town where it's like a $30,000 budget, but you're still 10% of that. You're setting a new record for that area more than likely. You know what I mean? Like, this is how important it is. So I look at this as, can it sustain itself as an overall percentage? I don't know. But what I do know is it changes the game of like resetting the value of a DJ where maybe we go back to flat rate at some point. I don't know. But it redefines what the value of the DJ is, hopefully, right? And
it actually makes it easier on the couples and the clients as well, because, even when it comes to running our businesses, right? I'm assuming you do the same, is that we actually pay attention to the percentages for our margins, right?
1,000%.
So it really it protects the client as well.
The one question that came up with the planner when I was talking this through with one of them, the one that booked, she said, as you know, budgets never stay the same. What you come in with a budget, it never stays there. It always goes up. So how do you protect that part of it? Like, how do we know? I mean, obviously there's the maximum in my example of the $50,000, but knowing that this has got to be driven through your contract clearly. So it's really important to have a lawyer kind of look at that and make sure they've dialed that in. But a couple of thoughts I had, because the example she brought up, which I thought was a good one, was food costs are crazy right now. Like inflation is just driving the food costs out. It's just crazy. So her thought was that a client could make the argument that we're not changing the scope of the overall event. It's just that the costs have gone up. So if the budget goes up, and the way let me back it up a smidge too. So one of the things I've tried to encourage so far is I want the budget number to be real. I don't want you to lowball me and then get 6 months in and realize that we're at $200,000 more than we needed to be, because that could have changed the preparation and all of that. So the way I have it structured for me is I've got check-in dates. So 6 months prior, we have another budget check-in. My balances are due 60 days prior. So between then and there, we have a 3-month check-in. So 6 months, 3 months, 60 days. If it goes up, then we readjust what they owe me, because now because
you're on a percentage, right?
We're on percentage. So it's gone up. Right. So I looked at that and I thought, how can I try to make this fair though? Because first of all, if it went up $100, am I going to give them another invoice for $1? You know what I mean? Like, are we really going to be that petty and especially when we're talking about big numbers? So my thought was, I'm going to make the increments 25,000 as to when a new bill is due at that point. So if we're at 24,999, you're not going to get a bill. It's only until we get to the first 25,000 marker, right? And to encourage them to give me the accurate number, any subsequent changes to the budget for every 25,000, we're also going to go up 2%. So I'm at 10% now. We're moving to 12% on the next whatever 25,000 is. So,
gotcha.
And I even maxed that out too. So I said, hey, with a maximum of 20% upcharge. That gets to be expensive when you have that penalty in place of what it could have been if they would have just given me the number at the 10% number. Now we're at double.
So it actually encourages honesty up front, right?
It totally does.
Yeah.
So that's really important. So for them not to incur that 12%, this isn't their fault. The food just went up. Well, I don't really take that into consideration because, that actually means that if the food has to be cut back because the costs have gone up, you actually need the entertainment to be even better. So I'm not changing my stuff because I need to be even better than the food was going to be because the costs have been so exorbitant. And you might actually win out in that deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to me, those have been the kind of conversations with those planners of like, hey, just because the costs go up in inflation and whatever the case may be, that doesn't affect me. In fact, you actually need me to be better. So I'm going to keep that in there because I got to overcompensate for a lack of food situation going on in that example. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Absolutely. Help me understand though. So when the food goes up for your DJ services, let's say because the budget increased, what difference are you making for the increase in cost? Because I could see a couple or a client having an issue of like, wait, so I'm just paying extra because my budget went up, but is there actually more value that I'm receiving in exchange for that?
I hope so. That was the first answer. Because, again, the overall reason for going to percentage, in my opinion, is to not only have a decent value on what the DJ is worth to the overall event, but also knowing that number allows me to rise to the level of the event. If they all of a sudden decide to add a crazy amount of florals, and this thing is like, I've been in somewhere, it's like it feels like you're in a garden. This thing is just like they've added $100,000 in florals. Do I really want to be showing up with like a facade or like even a DJ furniture piece? No, it's got to like fit in with this overall aesthetic to rise to the level of the event. So for my first answer to you would be like, I would want to rise to the level of the event. I don't know what that means. That could mean more lighting. It could mean a different DJ look as far as the overall aesthetic. It might be musicians, right? If I know early enough, it might be for me, something along the lines of like, hey, I'm going to take one less event. I know I can mark that date off my calendar 2 weeks prior because I don't need to worry about it because we have an influx in cost to this event. So if I know 6 months in advance, that might be enough to be able to say, hey, I'm not taking any more that month because we've gone up $200,000. But that's also why I put that limiting protection of we're not only going to do this when it's 25,000 or more. Because for me, if we were even operating at the 10%, which we wouldn't be, we'd be at 12, but let's just say it's 25,000, it's $2,500, right? I can do a lot with $2,500 to add an element, something that would allow me to, maybe it just gives me my time back to come up with more edits. I'll give you one crazy example. I had somebody who wanted me to replicate an Avicii set at some point. And so I did this, but I'm not a music producer. So like a lot of the show edits that they wanted me to use of this Avicii show, I paid an editor who does that. Like they do that. So the increase in fee allowed me to take that money and allocate it towards that budget, which I never would have been able to do if I didn't have it. So there's elements of things that you can do with that money that will allow you to, and it's going to differ based on the vision, the scope of the work, what you're looking for. Because what I would spend an additional, let's say, $25,000 on for 50 people, I'm not going to bring in a full on band. That would be over dominating the space. But it might be, hey, let's add, a different experience for the welcome party or something else within the event that we can make it work. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I guess that's exactly what I was looking for was, let's say if a person, one client or the same client had a budget of $10,000, your fee would be $10,000. So $100,000 budget up to $250,000. Like they literally over doubled their budget, right? In a matter of a 3-month span. How do you educate the client of like, well, now my fee's gone up to $25,000, right? So $15,000 extra. They're going to want to understand the ROI for that of like, well, okay, I don't mind paying you $50,000 extra, but what am I receiving in return for that additional $15,000? So you had mentioned, it gives you more creativity and more capital to invest in things to take that experience to the next level, right? And that's just things that you'll have on a person-to-person basis, I would say.
Right. Could be a different staging element. It could be a different lighting element, bringing in a lighting operator where we couldn't physically do it for the lesser budget. There's certain things that can be in there. If I have an extra $2,500, I might be able to bring in an extra musician that we only had 2, but now I can add a 3rd feature, maybe we use a saxophonist and a violinist, or a percussionist. Now I can add a percussionist because we have the extra budget, if that's important to them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So it's hyper customized to the client based off their desires and their wants. Yeah.
And at the very base level, what you're doing is you're giving me more ability to not have to take the next job, right? To book the next show, because you're giving it to me to invest into you. So that might be me just pondering music for a while. It may not actually be a physical, tangible thing that I can say, hey, you're getting 5 more lights or whatever the case may be. Yeah. It may be just me thinking about your event. You're giving me the flexibility to do that, which just hopefully brings another level of a better show than I would have if I didn't have it.
Man, I love this conversation, Brian. Like, there are so many cool things about this. Unfortunately, we do have to switch gears and talk about some other topics, just because I'm really curious about the other things that you've got going on. So you, Jason Janai, and Joe Bunn have teamed up with the DJs Collective, and you guys are kind of changing things around a little bit, it seems like. So you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So we have, for the last few years, done one meetup, or I guess you can consider it like a conference. We call it an experience because we try to make it very interactive. And man, this last one we just did in Atlanta, it's usually in November. It moves different cities every year to give people different experience, and us not to get bored of the same places. We went all in, man. I mean, we did this. We really rethought the experience. Most people do it at one hotel or one venue. We were in different venues for different days, and just brought in some talent that usually you get one of those guys you're lucky to have. And we had, some of the top tier people that you would just be like, man, to see them all in one place, I got to go just to see these people. So we're hyper focused on that. And we felt like we were maxed out. Like, we were burnt on just the thought process it takes to put this together. And we're like, we're giving everything we can to this Atlanta one. Let's take a year off and rethink it. We think it's time, and let's leave it at the optimal peak. And so we aren't doing a conference this year. We're doing what we call a recharge, which we started this in 2020. And a recharge, we only did it in 2020, and we did our second evolution of it in last year in 2023. So recharge kind of started for those in 2020 that couldn't, with gathering restrictions. We had to limit it to 50 people. We had been averaging between 100 to 150. I think at our peak we were at 200. No, I'm sorry, 180 is what the max we've ever had in an event. So the recharge, we're like, gathering restrictions are 50 people or less. That's what it's got to be. And we call it the recharge because we felt like it was giving people hope. Like, it was recharging their batteries, refocusing. It's a little bit of health and wellness to it too. So there's some components of that as a recharge, just like being around people that you don't feel like you're going to a conference. You feel like you're going to almost like a retreat vibe, if that makes sense. Like you're recharging.
So more intimate.
Batteries. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And that was so good in 2020. And we're like, man, I think that the world has kind of started to shift since then to this kind of retreat look. Like, there are obviously the big conferences that are still out there, but you're seeing more and more little micro ones pop up, and people are preferring that kind of intentionality, that closeness of people that can really connect with, that we
host one of them ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we did it last year in Raleigh, and it was fantastic. It was one of the best decisions we've ever made. It was 20 people. They felt like they got really great individualized attention. They made connections that they're still with to this day, that in a big conference, there's no way they would have been able to meet 20 people, maybe, but not to that level. So we're like, hey, we can do a recharge and give us some time to rethink what the conferences are going to look like in the future. So we have one coming up in July, the 21st to the 24th. We're holding it in Raleigh again. And then we are also doing one in the first part of 2025 in Scottsdale or Phoenix, Arizona.
Cool.
And we may in 2025 add a conference to that too. But for this year, we just wanted to kind of strip it back, do a recharge, give us time to rethink how to do a conference the way that we feel like it needs to be done through our stylings, and bring a new level to it somehow.
And how can people find out more about the upcoming recharge in Raleigh?
Yeah. Go to the DJCollectiveofficial.com, the DJCollectiveofficial.com. There's about 30 spots left, so you can register there, and there's tons of information on it right there.
Gotcha. And do you already have kind of something in mind that you're looking forward to speaking on?
we haven't framed out what that's going to look like. We also
is it going to be this new pricing model possibly?
That'll be part of the
right?
session for sure.
Yeah.
But I think what we did last year, was I think we call it 3 perspectives. And so what happens a lot of times is where you go to a conference, you hear somebody talk about sales, and you might get lucky and get somebody to repeat the topic, but from a different perspective. That's usually rare. Usually it's one only. So what we felt like was really kind of a way to differentiate ourselves, and because we have such different models between the 3 of us, we asked everybody in attendance, what are your pain points? What are some things that we can help address? And we picked the ones that we thought had the most crossover, that could do the best as far as being able to, in this format. The 3 of us sat on stools. We each took 10 minutes of a topic. So what was great about that is I didn't have to carry a whole subject matter. I carried
so it felt more like a panel.
And we basically didn't even do question and answer. We just said, okay, here's the question. As an example, how are you guys, I'm just thinking of a good example here. Oh, how do you use SMS messaging in your CRM?
Sales process
sales process, whatever. And so Joe's going to talk for 10 minutes about that. I'm going to talk about 10 minutes for that. Jason's going to talk for 10 minutes, and we all use it differently in different ways. We have different methods. So you might start to align with one person in the way they see the world, or you might go, none of that makes sense for any of those 3. My way is this way. And maybe it gives you confidence to try a different method or whatever the case may be. So we each did, actually, I think it was like 5 minutes now that I think about it. So it was 5 minutes a piece. So we had 15 minutes. And then the final 15 minute was open Q&A at that point based on that topic. And I'm like, what happens if we get nobody giving us questions on this stuff and we just basically have 15 minutes to kill? That was never a problem. In fact, we had to cut it off every time because we were just getting inundated with so many questions related to what our initial answers were or something else.
And I'm assuming sometimes you may even contradict one another, right? Where
totally.
Then people really want to know.
Totally.
Yeah.
So that model is what we did at the last one, and it was well received. So we'll probably do something similar. I know one element we want to add is more peer-to-peer. So we're going to figure out how to make that be more peer-to-peer. So it's not just 3 figureheads on the stage talking, although, it's nice to kind of hear what some of the leaders in the industry are doing. But I think it's great to also go, hey, I want to hear from somebody else too, and get 10 perspectives as opposed to just 3,
Yeah. Love to chat with you after this, because that's exactly the format that we run in our masterminds. Is we of course have leaders and mentors teaching the tribe, but then also a peer-to-peer where the tribe helps one another out and hold each other accountable and problem solves and so forth. And that's been so magical, man. It's been incredible.
So good, right? Yeah. I'll never forget. We did it organically at our very first very first DJ collective in general. It started literally at an Airbnb, and there was 12 of us. And I'll never forget, we were done with the learning sessions. We had kind of already done for the night. And I think 11 of the 12 of us were on a laptop talking music just around a table. The learning didn't
That's
stop.
exactly how our masterminds are. Seriously,
right?
You're describing exactly that. Yeah, that's one thing that we love about these intimate events. Because at conferences that can't really happen, right?
No.
The magic, because everybody goes back to the rooms because you can't stay in one place, right? Because it's too large. Yeah. So that's awesome that you guys are on to that.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Totally.
I'm curious to find out, Brian, do you offer any coaching to DJs?
I do. So I have a couple of different things I do, but the one right now that I have room in is my group coaching. So it's very interesting the way I do it. It's weekly, which is great because you've got accountability. It gives you something to put on your schedule to guarantee that you've got an appointment there. But as you know, we all get busy, sometimes vacations and things. So we record every session. It's done on Zoom. So you can listen to the playback. I've been doing this since 2019. So I've got, almost 5 years worth of backlog of recorded content that people can kind of look the catalog up and say, hey, I need to learn about this. And they can hear some discussion there. Yeah. We bring in guests from time to time, but the thrust of it is kind of to the pricing model, these 301 business strategies, things that kind of make you think outside the box. It's kind of the goal of it. We also limit it to 15 people. I find that for me, some people have better capacity with that. I don't. 15 is, I found, like the perfect number for me to control the room, give everybody a voice, and not make it feel like it's coming across as a lecture, but more of like a team discussion, if that makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense.
So,
for sure.
We have, I think, like 5 spots. We're at 10 right now, and it fluctuates. You know, some people have to get in and out for different reasons. Speaking of that, it is like a join anytime, cancel anytime. You're not held to a 1-year commitment. So if things go haywire and you got to jump off, hey, cool. I mean, hopefully that isn't the case for you. Hopefully you can stick in it for a little while, but we understand people have things going on with that. So it's a monthly subscription model, I guess is the best way to say it.
Cool.
We charge $600 a one-time fee for the back catalog of stuff, and that includes your first month as well. So it's really like an extra $300 for that back catalog, if you will. Gotcha. And then moving forward, it's $300 a month, cancel anytime. And you know, it also includes a Facebook group that we have that's kind of for discussion and for different things there. And then lastly, we also host a mini retreat.
Cool. So another retreat. Awesome.
Yeah. So
this is only not like you specifically,
just the coaching group. Not... Yeah. We have, last year we did it differently. We actually have another DJ who runs a coaching group similar to mine, different focus. This is more as like health and wellness, but we merged on this retreat. So we were able to get a bigger space. He has about the same amount of people. So I think we had like 20 people in this Airbnb. We went to not Dallas, Austin, rented this cool spot. And it's like, again, you're living in a house of a bunch of people. And it's like those conversations that even, you know,
it's so cool for sure.
It's like 2 a.m. and you're still like just talking inside a pool. You know what I mean? Like it's just
100% recommend. If you have never done it before, definitely recommend you doing it. If it's not our mastermind, do Brian's or someone else's. Like you got to experience it because it's incredible. Especially when you have like just a room of like-minded people who are all driven and passionate about the same thing, right?
Totally. So so that's the space we have. Like I said, we've got about 5 places. These 5 spots, we meet on Wednesdays from 1 to 2:15. So it's 75 minutes worth of content. And of course, I mean, I'll lead the discussion, but we have a hot seat where you can kind of, everybody rotates the hot seat. So for the first 30 minutes of the call, you know, you're going to be on the hot seat, and that doesn't mean you're grilled. That means you get the chance to have the platform to go, hey, this is something I want to, you know, get groups ideas on this, or this is a problem I'm dealing with. How would you handle it? So we all get a chance to kind of get a question that we don't know what's coming until that moment happens. And it rotates through the group. So everybody gets 4 or 5 opportunities with that. And then we get into the main topic. So it's good, man. I mean, obviously I'm feeling the temperament of the room and trying to see like what's going to be the best kind of information for people that will serve everybody well in the group. So it's good.
Absolutely. And where can people find out more about that? Your coaching program and
Instagram is the best way to reach me. So if they reach out to me, the DJ Brian B Official is my handle. Just send me a note. I'm happy to talk it through. And I want to make sure we do a little bit of what we call kind of like a pre-screen. Not that you would be denied, but just to make sure it's everything about it before you just jump in. Because I don't want anybody to feel like, what did I just pay for and not know what's going in. I'd rather have that all figured out ahead of time so you feel confident going into it.
Well, awesome, Brian. Thank you so much for just taking the time out of your busy day to share your attention and your knowledge with the crowd and the audience. Make sure everybody listening to check out Brian B's podcast as well, the Travel DJ Blend, and make sure to give him a follow on Instagram at Brian B Official. Correct?
That's it. And Ben, I gotta give you your flowers, dude. Thank you for what you're doing in the industry, man. You're really raising the game for people. I see the ads. I know that those are genuine endorsements from folks. So thank you for like what you're doing, because it's really helping people, and I can see it firsthand from what I.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Keep doing it.
Respect goes right back at you as well.
Sounds good, man.
Awesome.